Hello, Facebook. Hello, friends. Long time no see. Just here tonight because I have some very contradicting information that I'd like to share with everybody. I don't do politics. I don't do mostly any kind of talks ever. That any of you who know me know that I don't do this kind of thing, more so one-on-one. However, I'm a little frustrated. Being up here in Shapley, Maine, last night, there was an individual standing on my property with a vehicle parked with his headlights on at 11 o'clock at night. Now, I opened the door because I have a camper that has a door that likes to flap open in the wind. And anybody who knows what last night was like, it was windy. It was windy up here Sunday night. Opened the door just to casually check one last time before bed. Gentleman was standing there. So I hollered, "What the hell's going on?" Gets in his car, backs down, and drives off. And goes like mad. So my immediate reaction, I jump into the car, and I pursue him. And I took video and pictures of this pursuit. He went from 0 to 80 like that. And anyone who is familiar with the Shapley area, he turned onto Newfield Road, went all the way down, Man Road, hooked back all the way down to Boonies, and then took a right heading all the way down into Acton, which then he took another left, which brought him down to Kenny's. I know that was a lot of turns, but in a very short distinctive. He went from my residence here in Shapley to Lebanon, Maine. And we did this within 8 to 9 minutes, going speeds between 85 and 110, which are on camera. During this time, I called York County Sheriff's Office. The reception was a little poor, but I was managed to get through, made a report, and I met up with an officer. They had us on actual satellite and radars and met up with them. Well, where do we start? Deputy, he showed up. We had a talk. The biggest problem was he wanted to know, where the gentleman was, how fast he was going. Did I know this guy? That's the most common question. Do you know this guy? Yeah, I know that guy that was standing in my yard at 11 o'clock at night with the headlights on. Yeah, I know who that is. Obviously, I don't know who that is. So, not being that much of a dink, I very calmly told him, explained to him the situation, why I was in pursuit. And I told him I was in pursuit. And while in pursuit, I stopped when I thought that it became unsafe. Because unfortunately, going 115, everybody's done it once in their life. It's tough. Especially that late at night when your adrenaline's rushing and you're kind of on the move and you're trying to get going. My problem is, Deputy Steves took all the information. Black Chevy Cruze, mind you. That's what it is. It's a black Chevy Cruze. It's a New Hampshire plate. And it was Deputy Spades. York County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Spades. And I'm calling you out, sir. I am. You're welcome. I am calling you out because the conversation today, and I have tried to reach out, and the biggest conversation I told you last night when we talked, I explained to you what happened, that I came out, there was a man standing outside of his car, he jumped back in his car when I hollered, and he drove off. I want to know who was standing in my yard. I have the right to know who was standing on my property at 11 o'clock at night, just randomly. I have a right to know that. I think any moral person would have the right to know that. So, I called this morning to get an update report because let's go back for a second. Once Deputy Spades took off to go in pursuit with another officer, he said he'd call me in a few hours to let me know once he figured out what was going on. So I went back home, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Now, the normal person who just went through this wouldn't just go home, go to bed, and be like, everybody's fine, don't worry about it. No, I did the moral thing. I stayed up. I waited, and I was looking outside the windows. I was making sure my house was safe, making sure family was safe. I did what anybody normally would do. And I waited all the way until 5 a.m. and still not a sign. By 5 a.m., I kind of gave up, said, all right, I'll call 8 and 9 in the morning. I called the local dispatch, asked to get an update. Officer NATO, who was very, very, very friendly, no complaints at all. Officer Nato did a phenomenal job getting back to me this morning. Phenomenally reported back the notes. However, what disturbed me was he said the note said that the deputy, Spade, he decided that he was just going to talk to the gentleman about his aggressive driving and that he didn't pursue anymore. But he didn't want to make sure, he didn't want to say it because it was Officer Nato giving the report. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he just said, okay, that's fine. No big deal. I'll let you get in touch with Spades later when he's in this afternoon. I said, okay, thank you, no problem. I got in touch with Deputy Spades tonight, about 4 o'clock. And I had a conversation with him. And he said, I talked to the individual. He said that the individual, and don't worry, Mr. Spades, I know that you are going to try and contradict what I said because we're going to get to that nice part in a minute. So I'm going to clear that in case this makes its way to you, which I hope it does. Because you can't lie to people. That's the thing about people like you. You can't lie. Just because you're an officer of the law doesn't mean you get to lie. And I don't like being lied to. And that's the problem that you're going to find with this. And a lot of people, you are done with the lying. That ain't happening with you anymore. I'm sorry. When you said that you spoke to this gentleman, you said that he was lost. He's in a very bad spot in his life. You were trying to play the empathy and sympathetic, which any good officer would do. No problem. I'm all for that. And your immediate response was, at this time, we're not going to charge him for anything, no trespassing, because he wasn't doing anything malicious. So my response to you was, okay, well, that doesn't seem right to me. And I did tell you that I have a right to know who was on my property at 11 o'clock. And I said that I feel it was trespassing. And I said to you, if you aren't going to pursue it as an officer, that's fine. But I went to the courthouse and I talked to an attorney, and I have the right to press charges on my own that don't involve you, which means that I need to know the information of the individual who was standing on my property at 11 o'clock, which you possess, which I am entitled to. Your immediate response was, well, since this isn't going your way, now you're making up things of the story because I told you that there was a gentleman standing outside of in my yard, out of his car, got in his car and drove off. You tried to say that the story I gave you, which I called 3 different dispatchers last night, and they all will have the recording, which you will find again in your lies, that I told the dispatchers that there was a gentleman that I was in pursuit of who was standing in my yard who got in his car and drove away. And I said that to you when I stood there in front of the other sheriff that showed up, who I unfortunately don't have his name because he showed up. He was a partner, you said, of yours. When he showed up, I said to you exactly what I said. He was standing outside when I walked out and I hollered. He got in his car and he drove off. Not once did I ever tell you that there was just a car sitting in my driveway and backed out. I never said that. And you lied to me about that today. And you tried to cover yourself because there's something you're covering, Mr. Spades. And I don't know what that is. But you seem to really sincerely, empathetically with this individual who was trespassing on my property, who was a threat to all of my things. You really seem to want to cover him. And that's okay. But it's not right. It is not right. So my problem is, Mr. Spades, is our current sheriff, William King. He represents York County Sheriffs, which means you represent him. So are you trying to say that the sheriff of York County Sheriff's Office is saying that anybody can walk on our property at any time, and if they're just having a bad day, that they're allowed to do that? We're not allowed to know and investigate and have an understanding of what was going on? Just because you say that this person was having a rad part in life, that he is entitled to do what he wants on all of our properties? No, that is not okay. That is not acceptable. There is a difference between somebody that's crossing the path and during the daylight hiking and accidentally goes to the wrong house, corrects themselves. Nobody at 11 o'clock at night is just standing in your driveway looking at your stuff. That's not normal. So that's not a bad part in life. And for you to say that he wasn't doing it maliciously and for him to say that it was normal, that's wrong to me. And I don't believe that William King, our sheriff of York County Sheriff's Office, would agree with that. In fact, I think he would also know that I am entitled to know who was standing in my property. And that's why when I told you I need that information so I may pursue my own legal actions, and you still wouldn't provide it to me. You told me I have to go to the jailhouse to receive these reports. I have a hunch you're going to make sure that I don't get these reports. So I am going to put this podcast out here in hopes that it reaches York County Sheriff's Office to make this very clear. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday, I will be at the York County Jail in Alfred at 8 o'clock in the morning. I will be requesting the full report that Deputy Spade says is there with the individuals' names of who was on my property. If I do not obtain that, that is fine. I will find a lawyer and I will subpoena the York County Sheriff's Office for this information. And I will also very, very hopefully ask that the Sherrif William King is in understanding that he is saying that anybody can walk on anyone's property for any given reason, anytime, any day and night, just because they're having a bad day. And everyone that knows me knows that I don't rant about this kind of things, but this is ridiculous. You have families at home, people. Every one of us have families. We don't go out looking for trouble. Nobody wants trouble. But when you bring it to the door and we call those who are supposed to help us and protect us and they're not, that's a problem. It is time to hold the York County Sheriff's Office responsible. Look at how many times they have screwed up. There's only 5 headlights that show the glory that they've done, but nobody wants to talk about the 500 things that they've messed up and completely blown out of proportion. And I'm here to say that at the end of the day, I am going to know who is standing on my property, and I will make sure that they are charged and that they understand that they're not allowed to do that. The emotional antagonizing that can cause on a person isn't necessary. You guys have families at home, and you all know for a fact if it was Deputy Spade at home and he walked in out at 11 o'clock and he saw a random individual on his lawn, they'd have his name, he'd be in the news, and the York County Sheriff's Office would be this beautiful, glorious thing who helped a fellow officer. But when it comes to us, the people, when it comes to us, the ones that they're supposed to serve and protect, we're the small guys that get no justice. We are the people that get nowhere, and it's unacceptable. It is not acceptable. They are not allowed to do that, and they are going to have to provide the information that we are entitled to. Furthermore, that being said, from this point forward, Deputy Spade's opinion that he represents the York County Sheriff's Office, which also represents our Sheriff, William King, and Deputy Spade's mind, if you are having a bad day, people, you can do whatever you want to do. Go to anyone's property, do whatever you want, and he will slap you on the wrist and say, don't worry, we're not charging him. Hell, he could go in your boat, break it in. He could go break into your truck. He had a bad day. No big deal. Because the first thing out of Deputy Spade's mouth, after I asked for his name so that I could follow my own procedures, he asked me if my property was posted. He said, do you have posted? And I said, that has nothing to do with it. There was a man standing on my property at 11 o'clock at night. When I went outside, he ran when I hollered into his car, and he drove over 100 miles an hour to get away from me, and I got to him. I got his plate. It was a black Chevy Cruze, New Hampshire plate. This man's from New Hampshire, not even in this area. And they're saying just because he had a bad day, he was lost, and it doesn't seem like it would be beneficial to press charges. They're not going to. So I'm supposed to just allow him to come back whenever he wants, come on my property when he's having a bad day, drink a margarita, play some rummy, and have a nice time. No, that's not acceptable, York County Sheriff. So I will be there tomorrow morning, and I expect to get my report. If I don't, I will have the lawyer, and I will also... I very, very hopefully, if you do not provide me what I need to go follow through with my own personal charges that I'm allowed to do, as we all are allowed to do as a community. We are all allowed to go to the courthouse and file a charge against anyone that we want to. Just because Officer Spade says we're not charging them as the police does not mean it ends there, people. You have the right. You can go to the courthouse and charge anybody for anything you want as long as you're willing to bring the evidence to prove it. Do not let the York County Sheriff's Office tell you that the line ends. If there is anyone else that is seeing this right now, or hearing this, and you've been in a position where you've been told by the officers, let it go, let it slide, no big deal, come forward now and make it happen. You need to tell the sheriff's office it's not okay, and William King needs to answer to this. And if he doesn't answer to this, then unfortunately our re-elected Governor Mills will have to answer to it, because she'll be next. I will go there, and I will go to the senators. I will go as far as I need to make the point that we are people and we are deserving of the same treatment. It is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate it. So, I am very disappointed with York County Sheriff's Office. I am very disappointed in you, William King, the sheriff, that you would allow a uniformed officer to treat someone who is a victim. And I don't play the victim game, but I had a person on my property who wasn't allowed there at 11 o'clock at night, causing a disturbance, and you say that I am the problem for wanting to charge him? If you are having your uniformed officers make the people that they are supposed to be protected the victims, then there is something going on within that department that needs to be overlooked and looked at. And I am done covering for it. I have dealt with the police many different times. They've been very great in many times. I am not here to just shit on the police by any means. Do not take this as a rant that way. They do very successful things, and there are many officers uniformed that do very wonderful things. But this particular situation was handled poorly and is very unacceptable. And I will not stop until I get who was on my property in the reports that I am entitled to. I will not stop, and I hope nobody else has to go through what I did. So again, for everybody that is watching this, I want you to get the main point out of this, as I will rephrase. A gentleman was on my property at 11 o'clock at night. When I opened that door and hollered, they ran in their car and they drove 100. And I have the pictures, the videos. Anybody who needs to verify, I'll show the world. I got his license plate, but I don't have his name. And they won't give me his name because they said that just because he had a bad day, he's allowed to do it to everybody. So remember this. I might be sitting here upset and talking about it. It might happen to you. It could happen to you tomorrow. He could be in your yard at 11 o'clock at night. What are you going to do when Deputy Spades calls and said, well, that guy had a bad day. We can't do anything. You're shit out of luck. What are you going to do then? I won't look so crazy or so adamant or so angry as some of you might think right now. I'm trying to make the legitimate point that it's not right. There was an individual in my yard at 11 o'clock standing, got in his car, drove away, and I personally got in the vehicle and high speed pursued him to Lebanon, Maine, going 115 miles an hour in order to get his plate and information because there wasn't enough time to react otherwise. I had to do that. Any man who can get behind a car that fast and drive that fast was competent, coherent, and knew what they were doing. There was no mix match, bad day, patty whack, loss. No, they were scoping my yard. They were trying to find something. I have the right to know who they are, why they were there, and I have the right to file the necessary documents to ensure that they have a document served to them saying that they are no longer welcome on my premises. I don't do this for anything. I do this for real situations. This is a real situation. This is my home. I work hard for my things in my home. These things need to be protected, and they're not being protected, and I will not allow my right to protect my home be taken from me. So therefore, I really hope that this does reach York County Sheriff's Office. I hope that this does reach Sherrif William King, and I hope it does reach the governor to have her understand that a situation like this doesn't need to happen. These uniform officers need to understand that if they find somebody, as Deputy Spades talked to this individual who's from a different state and says he had a bad day, so I'm supposed to deal with it, that's not okay. If I say that, well, I appreciate your incentive in your investigation, but I would like to perform a civil suit, or I'd like to perform a personal lawsuit or a case, anything. If I decide to do that on my own, you are not allowed to withhold the information of who is involved because they were on my property. mine. And if they were on your property, Deputy Spade, you'd know their name. And if they were on your property, Sheriff King, you would know their name, and it'd be all over the news. And everybody can agree to that. We are treated less equal, and it's time to stop. So I hope all of you have listened. I hope all of you have understood the true message and not taken this as belligerent or ignorant. This is a true educated thing if you sit down and think about it. And I appreciate all that are listening. Thank you.